All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our session. I want to make sure everybody can get in the room. As you're joining, please feel free to let us know in the chat where you're streaming into this webinar from. We'd love to hear where some of you are, and I know we have some people from all over the US, including the coasts. I'm currently here in Brooklyn, New York. I see Tracy in the chat is also from New York, so feel free to let us know. But I did want to welcome everyone. My name's Gabrielle Oates from the Educating All Learners Alliance. And today our session is on early literacy for all learners from a whole child approach. Now, before we get started, I did want to share with everyone just a little bit of a background on what the Educating All Learners Alliance is, or ELA as we like to call it. And so ELA was started this year in response to COVID-19. And essentially, we are a uncommon coalition of over 60 partner organizations who curate resources, develop strategies, have webinars and events similar to this one to share some best practices in the field of education, particularly special education and for students with disabilities. And so we have some of our founding partners and members from our teams on today's webinar, but the organizations here founded ELA. And for today, like I mentioned, we are very excited to welcome Medha, Tare, and Sheldon Horowitz. So they're joining us from Digital Promise and NCLD, and we'll be sharing with you all, like I mentioned, a whole child approach to early literacy for all learners. If you do have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to add them in the chat. You can also, directly message us as the presenters, any of your questions specifically, and we will be including some links for you all that they mention in the chat. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Medha.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining. So as Gabrielle mentioned, I am the Director of Research at the Learner Variability Project at Digital Promise. And I'll just give a brief overview. So Digital Promise is a national nonprofit. It was created with the mission to spur innovation in education and improve the opportunity to learn for all through technology and research. As we all know, today's classrooms include a diverse student population who bring with them varied experiences and abilities. Learning sciences research also provides insight into how to best support and engage our full diversity of learners. So at the Learner Variability Project, our team works at the intersection of researchers, educators, and EdTech developers to bring that science out into the world so that we can design and develop more rich and equitable education for each learner. One way that we do that is through our whole child framework. So as you can see here, we have a framework that includes not only content, but also cognition, social emotional learning, and student background. We know that there is no one profile or set of profiles for learners. So each student can vary on a number of factors that have been shown to impact learning. And we use this framework to consider how different components of learning interact with each other and ultimately impact outcomes. We translate this ever-growing research, and that is one of my main jobs, is to read the original peer-reviewed research, and we translate it into easily accessible factors and research-based strategies that can inform product design and classroom practice. So these factors and strategies, as I'll call them, and you'll see more about that in a moment, they comprise what we call learner models. The models are free, open source, and again, based on our whole child framework. We currently have 7 learner models on our site, and I'll go into the interactive online tool in a moment. But we currently have 7 learner models on our site, 3 for pre-K through high school math, 3 for pre-K through high school literacy, and we just launched an adult learner model last month because we know that whole child turns into whole person, and all of these factors are still at play throughout the lifespan. So before I go into the site, I'm going to just give an overview of early literacy from this whole child framework. So this is This is our reading PK3 factor map. And again, I'll show the website in a moment. But just to give you a sense of what I mean when I say factors from a whole child perspective, we have the language and literacy components. So those are like decoding, phonological awareness, vocabulary, cognition, again, attention, inhibition, working memory, social emotional, emotion, motivation, social awareness, and then of course, student background, adverse experiences, primary language differences, and social supports. All of these are factors that we know are playing out for all learners. But we also know, more specifically from reading and synthesizing the research on early literacy, 3 themes have kind of emerged from that work. And I'll outline the 3 themes on these slides. But in the text on the slide, I just want to highlight the capitalized terms in blue are examples of the factors in our model. And those are terms and concepts that are explained in much more detail on our site. And then the other blue terms are research-based strategies where we provide videos, EdTech examples, and resources. So all of those are things that you can go back and look for on our site as well. So just in terms of the themes and laying the framework for what we mean by a whole child approach to early literacy, we know that early language experiences lay the foundation for reading. So reading development is rooted in children's early language experiences nurtured by their home literacy environment. A stimulating environment with read-alouds from a rich library is related to higher levels of children's motivation. Building students' vocabulary and background knowledge is key to supporting comprehension of both fiction and nonfiction texts, which is starting earlier and earlier to understand all those different genres. And while doing that reading, parents and teachers can be modeling connections to the text and teaching through multimodal instruction, which can lead to greater understanding of the texts. Okay. Students develop the building blocks for reading. So these are some of the factors that I started mentioning. So children use their alphabet knowledge and phonological awareness to start decoding, or that's the ability to sound out words. So explicit phonics instruction helps learners figure out unfamiliar words, and can be combined with rich input to bring these skills together with meaningful texts. Reading fluency is students' ability to read quickly, accurately, and expressively, and that develops along with their sight recognition and their confidence in reading. Strategies such as daily reviews and classroom activities such as word sorts can help students recognize patterns and become independent readers. And of course, this is not an exhaustive description of what happens in the reading process, but just to give you a sense of how these different factors are connecting to each other. And finally, supporting cognitive abilities can enhance learning. So again, another pillar of our whole child framework is looking at cognition and how it interacts with social, emotional, and background factors. Students' working memory and verbal reasoning support their reading comprehension by helping them make inferences and connections in the text. So modeling comprehension strategies and dialogic reading also guide students' interactions with text because they support those cognitive abilities. Young students may also need support in sustaining their attention for learning, and this is even more critical in the time of remote learning, right? They need to be able to get some energy out so that they can focus on the screen. Building in movement breaks and opportunities for physical fitness can support self-regulation. That's a social emotional concept, and students' ability to focus on new concepts. So this overview is just, again, a brief way of showing how those factors are connecting to each other and to strategies. And I will now go into our website. Again, this is one of the main tools that we wanted to share on today's webinar that shows you really much more dynamically how you can use this information. Okay. So you should be seeing the Learner Variability Navigator site now. And this is our main landing page. You can take the tour, which gives you an, if you want to go back and more slowly see how to use the site, please feel free to click on that and check it out. When you scroll down, you'll get to see, again, those 7 models that I mentioned that we've developed. The math, reading, and then the adult learner model that we just launched. When you click into a model, you will see, again, like I mentioned, the 3 themes that we just went through. So these are 3 kind of overarching findings. And if you scroll down, you can learn more about our methodology for developing the resource, as well as the names of the academic advisory, research advisory board members who oversaw the development and kind of were our sounding board for developing the content. And we have that for each model. This is the PK3 factor map that I showed the still shot of, but in our interactive tool, it's actually much more dynamic and fun to look at. Because what you can do is you can look at the factors and you can actually see how they interact with each other. So if I hover over decoding, I can see how the ones that are highlighted and lit up are all other factors where I've found research-based connections with decoding. If you go into a factor, you see a summary of that factor in terms of what the research says about how it develops. You can see the measures and references that we use to come up with this text and do our summary. And on this wheel, you can start to get more information about the connections. So decoding is related to morphological awareness, allows children to abstract the phonemes they hear from speech. Is of course related to vocabulary, so greater vocabulary depth is predictive of better decoding skills. It's related to working memory. Working memory contributes to decoding through the phonological loop. It can be related to hearing. If children have had inadequate language exposure, they may have some difficulty with decoding. It can be related to home literacy environment as well in terms of print exposure, which we know is critical. So that just gives you more information about how these things are related. And these pages, again, all of this content is free and open source, so it can be a great primer for getting, helping people understand what are the main ideas, what are the big connections that they need to think about when supporting learners who have different needs and who may be, in different places on all of these many different factors. Below each factor description is a list of research-based strategies for the factor. So again, these little kind of squares tell you the many different factors that are supported. And if you click on a strategy, for example, we have word sorts here. You will see a short description of what that strategy is. You'll see a video of a teacher using it in the classroom. You'll see an example of an EdTech product that may use that strategy as well, and then other resources that you can use to get started using the strategy in the classroom. We also have references for the strategies to show that they are research-based. Finally, for each model, we have a strategies tab. We know that we have a lot of content on our site and that people want to be able to sort it in different ways. And again, we have a lot of strategies because we are trying to address these many different factors that might be at play. So not just learning the skills, but how do you support attention in the classroom? You want to build vocabulary. So you can start to use these toggles to select or filter down the strategies because there are so many of them. We even have strategies for things like text to speech or visual, dim lighting. So students who may have sensory challenges. So again, there's a lot of different strategies and you can kind of play around. Throughout the site, you'll also see these plus signs. If you are interested in, you just have to use your email to be able to start a workspace. And again, that's so you can start to curate or save strategies and factors you might be interested in coming back to, because there's a lot of information you don't want to lose, something. You can just add it to a workspace and go back to it later. So that's just how to use the site, but I did want to back up a little bit and think about what we were talking about with early literacy and what that means over the years for students. So looking at our 3 factor maps, comparing the PK3 factor map, literacy 4, 6, and 7, 12, will give us an understanding of what's actually happening with these skills over time. So you'll see in the reading PK3, of course, we have these basic building block skills, alphabet knowledge, print awareness, decoding. And when we get to the literacy 4 to 6 factor map, you'll see a lot of the same factors across the other 3 columns, but for the literacy column, you'll start to see that these are being rolled up. So those basic building blocks are now part of orthographic processing for middle grade, elementary age children. So those skills should be becoming more automatic, and they're kind of part of this other higher level orthographic processing skill. And of course, for literacy, we will also have writing, foundational writing and genre knowledge skills as well. And then finally, for adolescents, those skills are still there. Reading fluency is critical, but of course, they are moving on to much more advanced literacy skills, where they are, of course, reading to learn, and they're reading to analyze and persuade, and critical literacy is a very important skill that's coming online. So all of those earlier building block skills that we saw have to be in place in order to be able to do these more advanced skills of considering the potential, the purpose of a text, the bias of a text, comparing multiple texts, critical theory or digital text. All of those components need to be in place in order to do that successfully. So those are our 3 models. And then I did want to go back to this idea of a workspace. So because we know we have a lot of content and it can be a little bit overwhelming, we've also, in our own work and then worked with others to create workspaces. And the workspaces basically can be created on different topics. And in this case, we worked with Megan Gross, who is a California State Teacher of the Year, to create a workspace on dyslexia. And I'll play her video, her introductory video.
Hello, I'm Megan Gross, the 2017 California Teacher of the Year and a special education teacher in California. I'm always looking for evidence-based resources to help guide my instruction and share with my colleagues. In my experience, teachers are often left to try and figure out how to embed IEP accommodations or support students with IEPs long after they've designed and implemented instruction. I wanted to create workspaces that would support teachers in identifying factors and strategies to use in their classroom from the very beginning. I believe if we design with variability in mind, that this will lead to better instruction, outcomes, and support for all our students.
Okay, so that's her intro, but and I think Gabrielle is going to put the workspace in the chat also. But the workspace itself pulls from, and she has her intro video, but then she has another video that she sort of walks through why she's chosen the strategy she has. So in order to support students with dyslexia, she has chosen strategies that support emotion, social support, and stereotype threat, decoding, orthographic, phonological, and morphological processing, which that's not surprising. But again, we want to consider the whole child, so we also have memory and fluency. And of course, that can also impact language understanding and math. So she's also pulled numeracy and math communication strategies from the math models. So these are examples of ways to use the content and kind of curate it, share it out, and then begin a conversation about how it can be used for a particular population. And again, as Megan said, we believe that providing these kinds of supports for one group will really just ultimately support all students in the classroom as well. So we have a number of other what we call signature workspaces on our site. And we can include the link for that in the chat as well. But I'm happy to answer any questions on this or the tool or any of the other things, as we wrap up the presentation. I think Sheldon is going to come back on to continue.
And I just want to share everybody, like she mentioned, those links are in the chat if you did want to connect about the dyslexia resource, the signature workspaces, and also, like she mentioned, feel free to add your questions in the chat. And we will now transition over to Sheldon Horowitz.
Hey, hi everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Medha. This was a great introduction to a terrific resource. I think it's wonderful that NCLD and the Learner Variability Navigator work is sort of finding space together in a way that really truly complements each other. I'll get into how in fact that's been working and I see it working in the future. But just a word about NCLD. Our mission, we've been around for about 40 plus years, is to improve the lives of the 1 in 5 children, adolescents, and adults who struggle with learning and attention issues. The strategies that we use to do that are, first and foremost, through public policy efforts, both local, state, and national efforts, making sure that students with disabilities of all sorts, and in particular those with learning and attention issues, have equal opportunities and equal access to high quality instruction and support. We have always been, through our professional advisory board and work that we've done across the learning disability space, interested in strengthening the field through research. And the work that we do is always in collaboration and in partnership with other organizations. We've had a very robust and continue to work with parents across many different states and across topics. And we have a parent institute and a council that we maintain. One of the really exciting new pieces of work that we've launched over the last couple of years is specific to young adults. And we are spending a lot of time now using the opportunity to engage with young adults so that they can become the voices of the field. They can be leaders in and of themselves, advocating for themselves and their peers, but also informing the work that NCLD does in the policy and advocacy space. The work that we've done over the last year in particular looks specifically at equity and intersectionality, looks at early detection of learning disabilities and attention issues, looks at specific learning disabilities identification, which piggybacks really nicely on the work that we'll be sharing today. And as I mentioned, the young adult advocacy and leadership work that we've done with our leadership council. So NCLD has had a number of iterations of a checklist over time. The first checklist was created back in 2006, and if some of you have been online and have seen that or been in the field for a while, gone to conferences, maybe downloaded it from a website, you can see on the left there's the original look and feel of the checklist. We, in 2011, updated the checklist, expanded it slightly, created some narrative and some complementary collateral materials, and republished it. And that was available as a downloadable PDF. Clearly, the science of learning and the science of learning disabilities specific to reading and writing and spelling and attention and social emotional learning has evolved. So now is the perfect time to update the tool. And the current tool just launched a couple of months ago is an online iterative edition of that same checklist updated with what you'll see is an opportunity for people to self-select different areas and actually get a report and link to some areas that people should be looking at more carefully. Okay, Gabby, are you going to start a little video that gives an overview, please?
Many of us have witnessed children struggling with learning or attention at some point in their development. But what if those challenges persist? It can be difficult to spot the signs of a learning disability. That's why the National Center for Learning Disabilities, NCLD, has created a new interactive tool called the LD Checklist, Recognize and Respond. Learning disabilities can impact many areas of a child's development, such as listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning, math, and social skills. The goal of this tool is to help you recognize and understand the possible signs of learning disabilities. The LD checklist is not a test and cannot diagnose any type of disorder, but it can jumpstart conversations with professionals and point to the specific type of help your child needs. As you use the LD checklist, reflect on your child's behavior over the past 6 months. The checklist offers a list of options, so you can select both the grade level and one or more areas of concern. Remember, it's not uncommon for a child to experience more than one learning disability. For example, they could have a reading disability and also struggle with math. The LD checklist allows you to select all the categories you feel may apply to your child. Items from the selected categories will appear on the screen, each representing a characteristic of a potential underlying learning disability. Completing the LD checklist is an important first step toward having a greater understanding of the key skills and behaviors that may be impacting your child's learning and behavior. Even if you only marked a few items on the checklist, don't wait to share what you've learned with your child's teachers and pediatrician. It is critical to seek out the support that your child needs to ensure their long-term success. Now that you're equipped with new knowledge and insight about your child, don't hesitate to reach out to teachers and others for support. Be open to feedback from qualified professionals about scheduling a screening or comprehensive evaluation. Share the LD checklist with other parents who may have similar concerns. Connect with NCLD on social media to grow your community of support. Early detection of learning disabilities can change the course of your child's life by providing them with the tools they need to succeed. Go to ncld.org/LD checklist today and start your journey.
Okay, thank you, Gabby. So a little bit of background. Why did NCLD decide, or what is it that facilitated the thinking around the need for a checklist of some sort to begin those conversations, to get parents and teachers talking, to sort of get the information and the background about a learning disability or potential risk for a learning disability out in the open. Way back when we first created the thinking around the checklist, we looked at how students were being evaluated and when they were first being recognized as having difficulties. This chart, which you can see on the slide with those lines going up and across, constitute the ages at which students with SLD, other health impairments, developmental disabilities, and speech-language impairments were identified. And you can see that the line for LD, that blue line that sort of starts on the bottom left and goes up, 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 greater numbers of kids were being identified at older ages. And part of what we understood was that there was every reason to believe that the early signs of learning disabilities, the early signs of struggle mapped onto literacy, mapped onto numeracy, mapped onto being able to pay attention, fine and gross motor skills, the kinds of things that map onto school success could have been and are often able to be identified sooner rather than waiting for a child to experience difficulty in school. So why is it that people wait? Why is it that those conversations are not happening? What are some of the barriers to recognizing and responding to those early signs? Well, there have been lots of work done over the years, many surveys starting back in the 1980s and certainly in the 90s. We hear over and over again that there's a sense of shame and a sense of stigma, and parents are worried. Educators are also worried often about the fear of labeling a child and how will it impact their ability to succeed in school and their feelings about themselves in school and that trajectory through school. I can't tell you how many times in an IEP meeting or having done an evaluation in a clinical setting, a parent will ask, okay, so if my child has dyslexia, or my child has a learning disability in math, will they be able to go to college? I mean, there's a whole sense of dread that goes with just having that label. Starting the conversation early, providing as much support as early on as possible is really key to getting that information out, dispelling those myths, and preparing a child for a trajectory of success throughout their school years and beyond. Educators similarly have expressed that it's difficult to differentiate between a child who has a delay versus a child who has disorder. Who are those children who are just hard to teach? And which of them needs a very specific kind of instruction? And can my school district provide that? Or can I, in my classroom, provide help in the way that a child needs to learn? And pediatricians have also been part of that mix, part of the solution. But as we all know, talking to parents, and those of you who are parents yourselves know how little time pediatricians spend with kids in those visits and during those visits. And how do you feel about reading often doesn't come up. How do you feel about math? What's your favorite subject in school? Can you tell me why? What are those early indicators? What are those descriptors of risk? Those are the kinds of conversations that could be enormously helpful. And the LD checklist is one way to jumpstart those conversations. So as you saw in the little video, the LD checklist provides an opportunity for a parent or an educator or a nurse practitioner, whomever it is, to use this free online interactive tool to pick the grade level, is preschool or kindergarten through fourth grade, middle school, and then high school and young adult. Once you've picked the age or the grade, then you can pick different areas, be they attention, be it math, be it reading, be it language development. You pick the areas, and it could be multiple areas, not just one. And if you look at math, it actually, as an example, think about the person's behavior over at least the past 6 months and then select which of those items you think might actually apply. I used math as an example. Could have been reading, could have been language, could have been attention and social emotional development. But as each of these items, as you see, there's a little blue marker with an eye at the end of this first one, has trouble telling time. If you click on that on the tool, you'll actually see a picture of an analog and a digital clock. So it'll differentiate for those people who don't know what time telling for each of those might look like. And the highlighted in yellow item actually will be, if you scroll over that, you'll get a pop-up which explains in terms that are not so technical what it is that that terminology means. So it's a really easy, friendly way of assessing and understanding what those key concepts and terms are. The next steps, clearly, are to look at the ways that all of that information that you put is aggregated. Once you've got the list of items printed out or organized on your screen, you can actually click to resources, very much like the Learning Variability Navigator that offers resources on those particular items and topics. You too can go to the checklist items that map onto, here are a series of activities that you can do. Here are things that you can do in the house. Here are things that a teacher can do in school. They're linked to evidence-based practices that have been carefully vetted by people in the field. What we also did, because we know that having information is great, but not knowing how best to use that information can be another stumbling block. So we created 2 resources. One, questions to ask educators if your child is struggling, and a second one, questions to ask pediatricians if your child is struggling. So these are the kinds of things that could be really instructive. Give a family, give a parent, give a teacher a voice specifically to be able to know how to actually ask those questions. So for example, in the pre-reading K area and in writing, a parent might have a sense as to what they want to ask but don't know how to word it. So they may say, all right, I notice my child has trouble connecting letters to the sounds they make. What are some ways to improve that skill? Just asking that question in that way could jumpstart a conversation and put the parent back in the driver's seat, put the pediatrician in a place to be able to say, you know what, I need to follow up on this, put an educator in a place where they can communicate differently with parents and other professionals in school. So that's the LD checklist. I hope you'll go and visit, you'll use it, you'll print it out, you'll interact with it. The resources are being added all the time to the checklist. If there are resources that you think would be valuable to add to the menu and the library of activities, please share them at info@ncld.org and spread the word. We think the checklist is a really useful tool.
Thank you so much, Sheldon. Now, I know there were a lot of obviously positive comments in the chat throughout the session, but we did want to set some time. If you all had any specific questions, please feel free, apologies if you already asked them and we missed them, but please feel free to add them in the chat now. And we can use the next few minutes to answer any of those questions. I know that the videos that were provided, as well as the links, which we can drop some again in the chat, are helpful and informative. We really want to encourage you all, obviously not just to intake the information, but also to actually implement it, whether that be you as educators using it in your classroom space, or encouraging the families at your organization, school, and district to look into them more, and using it to help their students. We really encourage you to take action on those. Let's see, I don't know if there's too many questions. Let's see, I knew there were some earlier in the chat. I just wanted to check on those. A lot of people were, very excited to see some resources on related to dyslexia, which I know has is kind of a gap in some spaces. So that was a good point, Tracy. And there is a question here, if there is an option to print the LD checklist for those who can't access a computer. Is that an option, Sheldon?
Yes, the checklist can be downloaded and printed, and the results can be shared in paper or cut and paste into an email.
Awesome. And then how frequently are the strategies for LD support updated?
In the library of resources for the checklist, they're updated on a weekly basis. So just this morning, I added a half a dozen. So.
Awesome. Well, someone asking if it was regular, so I would say yes, very much so. And then a similar question, is there anything specific to 2E learners?
That's a really great question. And I would say that while twice exceptional learners do in fact have unique characteristics and often need something different than your garden variety learning disabled child, I think the conversation about 2E can be enhanced by just having some of those same language specific requests. So for example, if you use the Navigator to understand something about attention and dyslexia, and you use the checklist to be able to say, oh yeah, that does look like my child, and they're in kindergarten. Here are some resources through the checklist that they can use to actually build some of those early alphabetic principle and phonemic awareness skills. Here are some activities on the Navigator side that I can actually watch being used by a highly qualified educator to implement those, and so I can model those in school or I can model those at home. So I think the combination of Navigator checklist resources could really be a fantastic marriage, can be a fantastic sort of set of collateral materials.
And I'll just add to that as well. Thank you, Sheldon, for making those connections. On the Navigator too, the factors don't have to be deficit oriented, so you can think about the student's strengths as well when you're toggling through the potential factors that are relevant for a student. So, if you have a very social student, thinking about using the social awareness and relationship skills factor as an asset and finding more collaborative strategies to support, to enhance that student's skills and to combine that strength with something that they need to work on, using it creative ways is definitely encouraged. It's not just about challenges, but also where our students' strengths too.
Those are both really good points, and I think that having that combination of information and strategies can help both the teachers and the parents, like you mentioned, and it really is a great combination. It's a great point. For those who aren't necessarily looking in the chat, there was also, thank you, Lindsay, for dropping a Spanish version to the LD checklist. That's also included in the chat, and we can include that in the slideshow when we share that with everyone, the Spanish version. I just want to check for any more questions. I think maybe there's no more questions. People are just being extremely thankful, which we are happy to provide this information. I did want to thank again Medha and Sheldon for joining. As people, again, people are really identifying with this in the chat, and I think what a lot of educators in this space are facing is obviously the connection aspect with students during remote learning and hybrid learning, but also parents, family collaboration, and having skills like this can really set them up even stronger as they continue into their next semesters and quarters. And so we really hope you all can use these strategies to continue the rest of your school years strong and well supported. In the slides, you'll find Sheldon and Medha's contact information, so feel free to reach out there. You're also always welcome to reach out to the Educating All Learners Alliance for information. We are a coalition of partner organizations, and so if you find that you're missing information, one of us can provide you with that help and those resources. And so linked on this slide are some of our accesses to our resource library, how to submit them if you have any. So we really look forward to engaging with you in that way. But I think that is the end of our session for today. So we will be sharing the recording of this webinar with you all in the next few days, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.